What that means is it leaves it up to you, the end-use consumer, to make sure that your plant lives and does well. If you buy a tree in a container, like this magnolia right here, a big old container, well, that container is only that wide. Well, the root system for a tree like that would normally be this wide. Well, they've cut off or they've restricted their roots. The roots are growing in that pot right there. Well, where are those roots growing? They go out to the side of the pot and they go this way. And they go around. And they go around. And they may go around for a while, especially if that plant's been in the pot for a while. Okay? That's the only soil medium it has. When you pull that tree out of the pot, you're going to put it in the ground. These roots are going this way. You can't straighten those out more times than not, because once the cells are formed, that's the way they're going to be. They're just going to form that way. This branch, for instance, is not going to change its shape. It's not going to suddenly just go, well, I'm going to bend right here tomorrow. You can't do it. And roots are the same way. The way they grow, that's the way they're going to stay. Well, to assure that that plant doesn't get a girdling root or a root that's going to restrict it when it gets bigger, you've got to cut those roots. What I take is an old linoleum knife. You know the linoleum knife? Anybody know what I'm talking about? It doesn't matter. Any old sharp blade knife is going to get dull in 2 seconds anyway. And just whack down the side of the root ball. Just strike it down the side of the root ball. It's called slicing it or scoring the root ball. Do it at least 4 times. I usually go about 6 times. Around a root ball that size, I'd go several times. Just cut those roots. Now, they're not going sideways anymore. What's going to do is stimulate the roots coming out. When we dig holes to put plants in the ground, they always said, put a $10 plant in a $20 hole. Okay? What that simply means is that if your root ball, the pot is this size, double that size to the width. The good news is you don't have to go down too deep. More times than not, if it's in a container like that, and you have the top surface of the root ball right here, going by the book, you read it in the book, it says take the top of the root ball and put it even with the grade of soil that you're putting it in. Not anymore. No, now you want to take the top of that root ball and take it at least 1/3 of the way out of the ground. What does that mean? You don't have to dig as deep. You can dig wider where the soil is still soft, but you don't have to deal with that churn. Don't worry about it. Make sure that the root flare or the trunk flare, where the tree flares out from roots like that, is above ground. The biggest mistake most people make is they put it too deep in the ground. If you're not sure, the safe bet is take 1/3 of the root ball and plant it up out of the ground. The roots in the upper third of that root ball, we don't want anyway. They're too shallow. We want roots down deep as they can go, 18, 24 inches, but they're going to spread out. But the idea is you want to get the trunk flare up out of the ground. And the reason is roots have to go away from the tree like this and like that. Roots that go like this are a choker because they don't move. Now, if my tree's here and my root's out here, I haven't got a problem. That's not this year. But guess what? The tree does this. The root's not moving. The root's getting thicker too. 3 to 5 years from now, the trunk's out here, the root's right against it, and it's choking it off. And I'll explain why it's choking it off in a minute, but that's called a girdling root. And that comes from being planted too deep or the roots weren't straightened out. Now, when you get a tree that's balled in burlap, wrapped up in burlap, more times than not, they field grow them and they root prune them as they grow. And when they dig them out to wrap the burlap in them or put them in that wire cage, well, they cut off the bulk of the roots. You'll see roots as thick as 2 fingers cut right off. Well, imagine how much root system was missing there. And when they cut that off, what they do, it drives me crazy, is they'll take extra soil and pile it on top of that root system, right up in the trunk, over the trunk flare, and wrap it all up. That's to stabilize the tree in the root ball. Why? Because if they made it just a shallow root ball, the tree would just go like this and ship it. So they make a big round ball like that, and wrap it all up nice and tight with twine and everything like that with the wire basket, and that's how it ships and stays together. But when you get it home, you want to do this. Make sure that you take the top of the root ball apart. Take all the twine off, all of it. Just take it all off as much as you can. Take it all off, pull the soil away until you see that flare of the trunk. Trunk flare, root flare, whatever you want to call it. You see that flare, that's got to be above ground. What I have found more times than not is about 4 to 6 inches of soil piled on top of root flare. So you don't have to dig as deep, which is good. So you put your root ball right here, take the top off, then you measure how deep do I got to go. From the top of that soil, maybe an inch down, now I'm only going 12 inches down. You may have to stake your tree, stabilize your tree, when you put it in the ground. The latest recommendations over the past 10, 15 years is you don't stake or guide a tree at all. It's just not necessary, okay? More times than not, the tree will stabilize itself if done correctly. However, that being said, if you do what I'm telling you and take the soil off the top of the root ball, you're going to need to stabilize your tree, okay? And I'll talk about that in a minute. So anyway, you get your root ball, all that, the root flares above ground, plant the root ball slightly above ground. And if it's sitting on solid ground inside the hole, that's the best way. The very best way is the middle of the hole should have a little mound in it, a little trench all the way around. Take the sides of your hole and scrape the sides of the hole. Have you ever noticed when you take a shovel and dig a hole, the sides of that hole are glazed? That's exactly what it's called, it's glazing. Well, your roots can have a hard time penetrating that too. So take a little scraper or something like that, scrape the sides of the hole, rough it up a little bit, put the tree in the hole, backfill it with the soil you brought out. You don't have to put in the soil amendment. You can if you want to, but it's really an extra expense you don't need. And the second thing is, if the soil where the roots are just growing in that new root ball, that new planted area, if that soil is really, really, really nice, and the soil around it isn't all that nice, where are those roots going to grow? Where are the cell division going to take place? Where the soil is really nice. It's not going to go out and penetrate the native soil, which is what you want. You want the roots to get out and penetrate the native soil. So scrape the side of the hole, put the soil back in. You might have a little bit of soil left over. What I usually do is build a little berm or well around the top of that, so water retains right over the root system, and then water it in. Okay, now watering new trees. When I put a new tree in the ground today, I'm going to water it today, I'm going to water it tomorrow, and I'm going to water it probably the next 4 or 5 days for about a week or 2. Okay, but I'm going to taper it off, even as we get towards summer, because this springtime now and the fall, roots are going to be really active. Roots are very active when it's warm temperatures, ambient air temperature, and ambient soil temperatures, and there's plenty of soil moisture. That's when roots are active. Now, when roots are active, they don't do this. I'm searching around. No. Roots don't search for things. They don't seek out pipelines. What roots do is they divide cells. The cells divide where there's plenty of moisture and there's enough water. So what you want is cell division to take place, and it really does that a lot in the spring. So keep it watered well when you first put it in the ground. Once it's established in the ground after about a month, roots will start to really grow. And they'll grab the soil. There's an electrical connection between the roots and the soil. They'll start to grab hold and really do fine. Then all you want to make sure is the soil doesn't dry out. So maybe once or twice a week, depends on how much rain you have and how hot it gets. The big mistake many people make where they come home and find dead trees is they put a tree in the ground now and then they go for a 2-week vacation. And they think, oh, my lawn watering system will be enough. It's not. You got to get a lot of water right in the root system. A root system for a tree that size right there, I put it in the ground right now, by May, June, the roots will be out. That's about it. It's enough for the tree to establish and do really well, but it could also dry out really quickly. Keep in mind also, the soil you put back in the hole, that's loose soil compared to the native ground around it. So water's going to drain through it a lot quicker. So it's going to dry out quicker. So don't make the mistake of putting a tree in the ground today and then ignoring it for 2 weeks in the middle of summer as you go on vacation. Have somebody water. How much water? 50 to 100 gallons, maybe 75 gallons per tree. How do you know you're getting that much on your garden hose? The way I do it, 5-gallon bucket, take my garden hose, turn it on the rate I want. How long does it take me to fill up a 5-gallon bucket? It takes me 30 seconds. Okay, so I know in a minute I'm getting 10 gallons. Okay, so in 10 minutes, I'm getting 100 gallons. So that's how I know how much water I get. It's better when you water trees and shrubs to saturate the ground where it's squishy, saturated, just fill with water and then leave it alone for a while. That's the best way for trees and shrubs. Woody plant roots like to be moist, but they like the water to drain away and it pulls oxygen down to the roots. As the water pulls away, it pulls oxygen and air down to those air spaces. And that's the best thing for the tree's roots to grow. Except the biggest mistake is if you wait longer than a week, then those air pockets in the soil, or air spaces in between soil particles start to dry out. When they dry out, you lose